She was one of the premier singer-songwriters to come out of the 70s and continues to not only perform her own music, but also interpret some of the great songs of the past. Our guest this week is Melissa Manchester on the VVN Music Podcast. Hi, and welcome to episode 39 of the VVN Music Podcast. I'm Roger Wink, and this week I'm thrilled to have the great singer and songwriter Melissa Manchester as my guest. 4 years ago, I had the honor of interviewing Melissa for the first time as she was experimenting with a new way to bring her music to the public. A very successful Indiegogo campaign financed the making of her last album, You Gotta Love the Life. Now Melissa is once again using Indiegogo to raise money for the album The Gents, a companion to her 1989 set Tribute, but this time concentrating on the great male vocalists of the past. But the campaign is much more than just a fundraising effort. It's also a way for Manchester to connect directly with her fans and to offer them special perks for their support. This is a fascinating interview, not only covering the new methods of producing albums, but also the great singers of the last 70 years. We talked 4 years ago, I think it was, and at the time you were running your Indiegogo campaign for the album You Gotta Love the Life. And here we are again with a brand new campaign. I assume that you're finding this way of both financing an album and connecting with fans to be a really effective way of getting new music out there.
Well, it's interesting. It's very interesting. Having done it both ways, it really underscores being an independent artist and all that means, which is that you are your own engine. There's no big engine behind you. So that is a lot of good, and it's a lot of hair pulling as well from time to time.
Well, one of the interesting things on your Indiegogo site is the long list of items that go into making an album that I don't think most people realize, things from licensing and advertising and everything.
Sure, of course.
It really is interesting. You have some pretty amazing perks for certain donation levels, from visiting the studio to being an executive producer of the album. How did you come up with all of those?
Well, from lifting the curtain and allowing contributors who are fans to sort of lean in and get a sense of the overall process of making an album. From exactly as you said, going into the studio, getting a major credit on the album, to creating the perks to entice people to be part of the journey. I mean, that's the thing, for artists of my generation, this is still a very new paradigm, even though it's been well underway for a long time now. And the hard part is knowing how to take the first step. And for me, I learned how to take the first step by my students at USC, where I'm adjunct professor, because this is the only marketplace that they know. And it allowed me to see how fans take this sweet kind of proprietary interest in the process of making an album without stalking you, but and in terms of the perks, you have to give them a party favor for their contribution at the different levels. And we had looked at other websites to other campaigns to see how it worked, and that's how we came to the conclusion of what kind of perks to offer.
What's your feeling as far as being an independent artist now? And I'm sure when you were with Arista and other labels, it was always good to have all the support people that were doing all the background things. But do you feel a certain sense of control now that you're doing things independently?
Oh, sure. There's complete artistic control, which is the part that I love the most. If I have a vision and an urge and I'm getting feedback from the audience, asking me to make another album, and when is the next Indiegogo campaign, which is the sweetest part of the fan interaction, then it gives me a signal that it's time to go back into the studio and it's time to create a new campaign. And that is really touching. I was not planning on doing another campaign. I wasn't planning really on doing another album, although I had been trying to make this album for 30 years. It's not that I've been trying. I've been keeping it in the back of my head because it's a follow-up to an album I made in 1989 called Tribute, which was my tribute to several of the great women singers. And I always wanted to do a follow-up called Vocalists about the great men singers that meant so much to me. And I really feel that I carry the torch of all these great artists and all the great songwriters that wrote for them, because that was popular music in my day. And I think it is such an exquisite platinum standard that was created. It has yet to be surpassed. And so I'm happy to be one of those artists that keep it alive.
With you being one of the great singer-songwriters that came out of the 70s and is still vital today, when you go into a project like this, are you really looking more, though, at the song than you are at the singer? It's in other words, the singer was the vehicle to bring these great songs forward, but is the song the most important aspect of it?
That is an excellent question. And because this crop of great performers were not songwriters, and they relied on songwriters to customize and drape these songs around their voices, I have great regard for the song. The challenge was that for every song that I'll end up recording, there were 25 other great choices, because all of these artists had recorded a catalog of spectacular songs by incredible songwriters. And so, I had to find the one that would speak to me on a deeper level, representing each artist. And it either captured the essence of the artist or captured the sense of the longevity of their career. And it was those kind of questions that finally helped me come to the list of songs that I'll be recording.
When I first heard about the album, I immediately thought of Frank Sinatra, and especially Sinatra in those 8 or 9 years that he recorded for Capitol Records, because to me, that's like the gold standards. He had impeccable choices in the music he recorded, and then he had those great arrangers with Gordon Jenkins and Nelson Riddle, and it's like
Don Costa,
you could just do a whole album or multiple albums just drawing on just that little bit of music.
That is exactly right. And believe me, I've thought of it. When Ella Fitzgerald was taken under the wing to just start recording American songbooks, it changed her career, because she was no longer singing little novelty songs with Chick Webb. She was singing the breadth and width and height and depth of American popular songs. And that certainly would be a dream of mine. But this just was a lovely bookend to the tribute album. But you're absolutely right that those songs in that period of time was just spectacular. I mean, it was the perfect meshing of great arrangers to great songs to great artists. And I get it.
You have mentioned some of the real best of the male vocalists with Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Tony Bennett. Who else do you look up to and are looking to for this album?
Well, there are some obvious choices, and then there are some odd choices. The obvious choices, as you say, Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Nat Cole, Dean Martin, because from everybody that I know who went to Vegas in the late 50s, early 60s, they said that above all, in terms of showmanship, sexiness, appeal, it was Dean Martin. And I thought, okay, let me slow down and consider this. But I'm also paying tribute to the great Mel Torme, and I was honored to have him sing one of my songs. But I'm singing one of the songs that he did a ridiculous scat on, and I'm I've learned how to do it, and it's wild. And I'm also paying tribute out of the box to Gene Kelly. You know, I could do an album just on great screen stars who were not only dancers but great vocalists as well. And it was a toss-up between Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire because they were just giants in their field, multi-talented. And in my tribute to Gene Kelly, it's the only duet I'll be doing, and my sweet friend Barry Manilow is singing on it with me. And I'm also paying tribute to Johnny Mathis and the great Johnny Hartman. Johnny Hartman is a little-known vocalist, but he was a giant. He had a very brief career, but he had a magnificent voice, equal to Nat Cole, equal to Johnny Mathis, equal to all of them, really. He just died too young, but I love his voice. I always listen to him, and I wanted to introduce the world to his voice.
I know it might be a little bit early in the process, and it also might be that you want to keep a lot of this a secret, but I know that you've selected Night and Day to go along with Frank Sinatra, and have you made selections for most of the other singers?
Oh, yes, all of the selections have been made. All of the arrangements have come in. The thing that's exciting about this project in particular is that, once again, I will be recording it down at Citrus College. They have a state-of-the-art studio, and I recorded You Gotta Love the Life there. But this time, I'll be recording it with their Blue Note Orchestra. This is the orchestra big band that's made up of their magnificent students, and I have performed with them for 2 years in a row. And they're just astounding, and they're under the baton of Dean Bob Slack, and they're just trained fantastically, and they play state-of-the-art charts at their concerts, and they played my charts, many of whom were arranged by the late Peter Matz, and they just kick it really hard. And I thought, man, this is so great. And after the last concert I did with the Blue Note Orchestra, their dean asked if there was a project that I could think of that would be able to use the orchestra. I said, well, I've been always wanting to do the fellas, and it was done. It was just done within an hour. You know, he said, done, good, perfect. So I'm really excited to be working with the Blue Note Orchestra on this. And I'm really hoping that I can convince other student orchestras and big bands around the nation to play these charts, let me come and sing with them, give the kids a real-life, real-time opportunity to play excellent music, excellent charts, originally by excellent singers.
And my understanding is that Citrus College is actually a community college?
It is, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a community college.
It's amazing. They must have a pretty tremendous music program.
They have a tremendous music program. They have a tremendous studio. They have tremendous teachers, and it's sort of the best-kept secret in the nation.
Are you still teaching master classes?
I do teach master classes, and it wasn't by design. I was invited to USC to teach there, and I was on staff for about 4 years, and then I had to leave because I just couldn't get the days off to do it. But I hope to return one day. But yes, I do. I am invited to do master classes at different universities. Love it.
Now, I know that you're involved also with Barry Manilow's The Manilow Project, and from everything I've heard, obviously music education is very important to you also.
It is. It's important to both of us. I mean, we grew up in a time where music education and arts education was part of the public school system because in that moment, they understood that creative thinking leads to critical thinking. And now that we're getting rid of that, there is a void to be filled. The thing is that the value of a creative environment is so important, particularly during kids' adolescence. They need a structured creative outlet to work out whatever turmoil they're going through, whatever questioning they're going through, whatever stress they're going through. And if you take that away, what have you got left? Teaching them to take better tests does not lead to a better life. It does not deepen their thinking. It does not help with decision making. It doesn't expand their view on how to approach life, how to approach situations. So I am a huge proponent of alternative public education. And yes, Barry and I were deeply affected by music education, and I'm thrilled that Barry has created this Mallow project, which takes used instruments, repairs them, and brings them to a public school so they can have a music program.
You know, I've always said it's funny how school districts will put tens of thousands of dollars into a basketball or football program. Yeah. Not that that's bad things, right. But if one person out of every 20 years goes on to make that a solid career, that's going to be a lot. Where you take the money away from music, how many kids are going to go on to musical careers, either as teachers, performers? It just doesn't seem like the right use of the money.
I agree. I completely agree.
You know, back in the early days of your career, you worked with Bette Midler, Barry Manilow, Patty Austin, many others. At the time, was there any indication or belief or feeling that all of you would still be creative, vital artists 40 years down the road?
You know, the truth is you can't know what's going to happen 45 days from where you are as opposed to 45 years from where you are. But all of us were very hungry, and there was some kind of magnificent design in having us all be jingle singers, and everybody knew how talented everybody was, and we all sort of traveled in a pack, and it was always interesting to hear what new club somebody was playing in or what new publishing deal somebody got, and it's thrilling to look around and see which of your colleagues are still around and still vital and still contributing. It's beautiful. I also had the great privilege of studying songwriting with Paul Simon when I was 17. And, you know, what he taught me, I pass along to my students because it's rare to be in such close proximity to somebody that I consider a real genius.
You know, when we talked 4 years ago, the word I think you used was you were primitive as far as social media and all of the new ways of doing things. 4 years on, are you feeling more comfortable with it and seeing the advantages?
Yes, I do see the advantages. I'm feeling a little more comfortable with it, yes. I still use a former student to help me with the campaign, and there's more of a network to get the word out. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel primitive anymore. I really see the tremendous value and the new marketplace of it. So it's really fascinating. Yeah, it is.
It's a whole new world.
It is a whole new world. It's good.
You know, when you look at the current landscape of music, and not so much the way that you get the music out, but the modern artists that are out there, is there anybody that stands out to you as being someone who you can see doing the same thing that you've done, being this important artist 40 years from now?
Well, I think Adele has a real chance at that. I think, I don't know. I think John Mayer is really talented. I think John Legend is really talented. I think Michael Bublé, because he has invested so much in the American Songbook, it will be interesting to see what happens to him in the future. Yeah, I mean, what I like to do sometimes is listen to college radio to hear, you know, what young ones are creating, and sometimes it's really interesting, and sometimes it's really not. But that's probably been true of every generation.
But at least with college radio, you get to hear a much wider swath of music than a lot of times with commercial radio.
That's exactly right. And I really like to hear what kids are listening to because there's always something I can learn from something that piques my interest. And, you know, whether it's a turn of a phrase or a syncopation or a percussive idea or melodic idea, mostly melodic ideas are sort of wanting, because rhythm is the king. And so the melodies are given shorter shrift and percussion is given a greater place. So I find that sort of less interesting, but it's still interesting to listen to once in a while and learn from what you can learn.
Before we finish up, the last time we talked again, your son was working as a talent agent and your daughter was singing, I think you said, on a cruise ship. Mm-hmm. Are they still pursuing musical careers?
Well, my son is a talent agent at this point. He works in television lit and sponsors great, brilliant young writers who are in television. And at this point, from 4 years ago, cable TV has just taken over really great TV, so he's involved in that. And my daughter is out of the business. She decided that it just wasn't for her. She didn't love the life. And so she lives in the Midwest and has a good, steady job, and she really enjoys that.
Well, I hope that everything goes well with the new campaign. I'm sure it's going to. And I look forward to hearing the new album. I think it's going to be great.
Thank you very much. I look forward to sharing it with you. I appreciate it.
To support Melissa and her new album, go to Indiegogo.com and search for Melissa Manchester or click on the link in the show notes. We'll be back next week with another edition of the VVN Music Podcast. Remember that you can hear the VVN Music Podcast via iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Libsyn, and the VVN Music website. For the latest news on the veteran artists of rock, pop, soul, country, folk, and blues, go to vvnmusic.com. If you have any comments or questions about the website or this podcast, please send them to vvnetwork@gmail.com. Our theme music is performed by Yahar. This program was released on May 1st, 2017. The VVN Music Podcast is a production of the VVN Network, copyright 2017.